Barron Trump stood on a windswept terrace overlooking the city. Far below, rows of gray rooftops and winding streets stretched into the haze. It was late afternoon, and the glow of sunset began to paint the horizon in muted oranges and purples. From this vantage point at the top of a historic tower, he could glimpse the battered skyline of an urban center struggling with poverty, outdated infrastructure, and the social rifts that came from decades of neglect. He had come here not for business deals, nor for silent negotiations behind closed doors, but for a different sort of mission entirely, a philanthropic challenge that many had deemed impossible. The idea had taken root a few months earlier when Barron visited a community center on the outskirts of the city. That center provided meals and rudimentary counseling services to families who had lost jobs due to factory closures. He spent a day listening to weary parents, energetic kids, and volunteers who try to keep hope alive with dwindling resources. One volunteer, an older man named Gerald, mentioned that the city used to thrive with a booming manufacturing base, but as industries moved overseas, entire neighborhoods had been left to decay. Over lunch, Barron quietly asked what might help revitalize these communities. Gerald responded that local nonprofits did what they could, but struggled to secure consistent funding. Churches, youth programs, and grassroots organizations tried to collaborate, but each faced its own battles. Without a unified strategy or large-scale investment, improvements remained incremental. Something about that conversation lingered in Barron's mind. He had always believed in the power of quiet leadership, yet philanthropic efforts often got bogged down in top-down approaches that never truly engaged local stakeholders. So he started brainstorming. What if he introduced a challenge, some kind of large-scale philanthropic push that forced everyone to come to the table with ideas, resources, and commitments? He envisioned a model that was transparent, encouraging partnerships among grassroots organizations, city officials, businesses, and philanthropic foundations. Not a mere donation or single grant, but a multi-layered initiative that demanded collaboration and creativity. People told him it wouldn't work, that he was naive to think different groups would unite. But he'd heard that before and seen that skepticism crumble under the weight of consistent, thoughtful engagement. Thus was born the Philanthropic Challenge, a citywide competition that promised substantial funding to the best community-driven projects addressing poverty, education, and economic revitalization. Barron structured the rules to encourage groups to partner up, combining efforts so each proposal had a blend of local knowledge, professional expertise, and measurable outcomes. To ensure fairness, he set up an independent committee of respected figures: teachers, small business owners, local activists, academics, and even a few external experts. Their job would be to review proposals, conduct site visits, and help refine ambitious ideas into actionable plans. Meanwhile, Barron pledged a considerable sum from his personal resources to fund the challenge. Additionally, he used his influence to attract matching funds from other donors. The total pot, if used wisely, could spark lasting transformations rather than fleeting charity. It wasn't long before the city buzzed with anticipation. Organizations that had long toiled in near isolation found themselves forging alliances. A youth sports program teamed up with an adult literacy nonprofit, recognizing that their clients often overlapped in families that needed both educational and recreational support. A struggling tech incubator discovered synergy with a community garden project, merging technology-based training with sustainable food distribution. Everywhere, newly formed collaboration sprouted. The competition's rules mandated that proposals had to show both innovation and local involvement, which meant no one could just pitch a flashy concept without community buy-in. They had to demonstrate real partnerships, real stakeholder input, and transparent budgets. Many wrote it off as an impossible set of constraints, until they realized how serious Barron was about fostering a culture of collaboration. The day after he formally announced the challenge, the city's main newspaper ran the headline: "Trump's Challenge, Saving Us or Selling Hype?" Accompanying articles range from cautious optimism to outright cynicism. Some people predicted that the usual turf wars and bureaucratic barriers would derail everything. Barron didn't respond with lengthy statements. He simply repeated his intention. If the city came together in good faith, real funds awaited them. If they fell back on rivalry and distrust, that money would remain unused. It was a stark proposition, one that placed responsibility on local actors rather than external managers. As the submission deadline approached, a wave of proposals flooded in, far exceeding initial expectations. Some were clearly incomplete or unrealistic, but many carried intriguing depth. Multi-point strategies to refurbish abandoned buildings, turn them into mixed-use community centers, integrate youth training programs, or link local artisans with e-commerce platforms. The Challenge Committee found themselves reading late into the night, enthralled by the creativity being unleashed. They organized preliminary review sessions, asking each proposing group to refine their plans. Through those sessions, different proposals started merging, combining their best elements. Soon, the entire city was abuzz with a sense of productive energy rarely seen. It was exactly the synergy Barron had hoped to spark. Throughout this process, he maintained a low-profile presence. He visited small gatherings, sat in on brainstorming sessions, and quietly offered suggestions to ensure that proposals remained feasible. His presence reassured participants that the philanthropic funding was real, not some fleeting PR stunt. He also insisted that local media be invited to witness the evolution of projects, ensuring public transparency. Day after day, the city discovered that disagreement could be channeled into constructive debate rather than the usual friction that stalled progress. Sure, conflict arose. Some groups accused others of hogging volunteers, or suspected certain proposals served hidden agendas. But thanks to the Challenge's structure, groups had an incentive to resolve disputes quickly. Only coherent, unified proposals would receive the final grants. Eventually, the submission deadline arrived, culminating in a final array of proposals that the committee had helped refine over weeks of collaboration. The city's largest conference hall hosted an event where each coalition gave a short presentation. Barron was there, seated calmly in the front row next to members of the committee. In the audience, a packed crowd watched with rapt attention as each group took the stage, unveiling their master plan. Some used slideshows showing architectural sketches, while others showed short videos capturing personal stories from community members. Applause often erupted spontaneously. Skeptics might have rolled their eyes, but the atmosphere crackled with cautious hope. Hope that real progress might be around the corner. The committee deliberated for a full day after those presentations. Their task was to determine which proposals would receive grants from the philanthropic pot. The tension was palpable. Local news channels carried breathless updates, speculating on which alliances would emerge victorious. Some people fretted that the final decisions might revert to standard favoritism or big-name nonprofits overshadowing smaller grassroots initiatives. But the committee's composition, carefully balanced by Barron, ensured a range of perspectives that offset each other. If a professor argued for scalability, a community activist insisted on authenticity. If a local business owner worried about cost overruns, a teacher emphasized the intangible benefits to youth empowerment. Thus, the verdicts emerging from that synergy represented a genuine cross-section of priorities. On the morning of the public announcement, the city converged in the same conference hall. The stage was lit with a warm glow as the committee members, men and women from varied walks of life, sat at a long table. Barron positioned himself off to the side, wanting the focus to remain on the local participants. The event opened with short remarks from the committee's chair, a retired judge known for her fairness. She explained that awarding these funds was only step one. Each chosen coalition had to maintain transparency, engage local residents, and deliver periodic progress reports to keep receiving incremental disbursements. No lump sums would be handed over blindly. She then began listing the recipients. A multi-part project to transform an old high school into a community-run business incubator and adult education center. A renewable energy program that teamed up with local trades to train unemployed youth to install solar panels. a broad health and wellness initiative that merged mental health counseling with job placement assistance, ensuring families found stable footing. Each time a name was read, cheers erupted. Some winners broke into tears, the culmination of weeks of frantic collaboration that sometimes seemed futile. Now, their efforts were recognized, and a significant injection of funds awaited them. The entire city felt a wave of euphoria. Yet the judge also reminded them that the real work was just beginning. Implementation would test whether these alliances could thrive under real-world pressures. Tight timelines, limited manpower, unexpected setbacks. But for the moment, the mood in the hall was celebratory, a sense that something new had been born. Among the winners, a previously unheard-of partnership of local artists and environmental scientists garnered particular attention. Their project proposed to convert abandoned lots into art-driven ecological preserves. No one expected such a concept to gain traction, but the sincerity and the detailed plan behind it had impressed the committee. As one volunteer put it, "Finally, we're seeing the city as a canvas for creative solutions, not a graveyard for failed attempts." Amid the applause, a local journalist caught up with Barron. "Mr. Trump, this philanthropic challenge has clearly galvanized the community, but do you truly believe these diverse partnerships can deliver long-term benefits? Or is this a fleeting high?" Barron responded in his usual calm manner. "Lasting change depends on continued dialogue and consistent effort. This challenge provided resources and focus. Whether it endures depends on everyone's commitment. But I believe collaboration can outlast initial excitement if people truly see each other as partners." In the days that followed, the city streets buzzed with talk of the newly funded programs. Each coalition quickly set about establishing their frameworks, signing leases on properties, recruiting volunteers, purchasing equipment. Barron quietly arranged for mentors, professionals from his broader network, who could provide technical support, guidance on budgeting, or conflict resolution. He wanted to ensure that once the euphoria faded, groups had expert resources to keep them from stumbling at the first roadblock. Media outlets continued to report on the philanthropic challenge, some praising it as a model that could be replicated, others casting doubt on whether a city battered by decades of decline could truly stand on its own 2 feet. Barron, meanwhile, acted as a kind of roving mediator, dropping by different project sites unannounced. He'd engage in straightforward conversations, asking how morale was holding up. If he sensed any tension building, he'd help them recall the principles of open communication that birthed these alliances in the first place. His presence reminded them that while they had to manage daily operations themselves, they were not alone. Someone believed in them enough to stake real funding on their success. A few months in, real challenges emerged. One coalition discovered that the building they planned to renovate was riddled with structural issues, inflating the budget. Another found that some local businesses felt threatened by potential competition from certain expansions. For a moment, it seemed old friction might resurface. But each time, the open lines of communication established during the challenge allowed them to tackle problems collectively. They'd host emergency roundtables, invite local experts to advise, or shuffle budgets to accommodate unexpected costs. Over time, these small crises became lessons in resilience, forging deeper bonds among partners. Though a few minor projects failed to launch, the majority kept momentum, buoyed by a sense of shared destiny. The city's progress also caught the eye of outside observers. A philanthropic foundation from another region visited, curious about the culture shift that seemed to be taking place. They found neighborhoods once resigned to apathy, now bustling with small-scale initiatives. A recently closed supermarket reopened under community ownership, aided by synergy with the job training scheme. The once struggling tech hub that partnered with local schools to offer coding apprenticeships reported that teen dropout rates had decreased. Step by step, the city showed signs of healing. No miracle cures occurred overnight, but methodical improvement took shape in ways more durable than a passing wave of charity. And with each success story, people credited the philanthropic challenge that had demanded they break down barriers and unify. Barron, observing from his vantage point, felt a quiet satisfaction. This was precisely the outcome he'd envisioned. Not a singular, top-down philanthropic gesture, but a dynamic ecosystem fueled by local energies. Over time, he introduced a second phase, additional grants for expansions or replicating successful models in adjacent neighborhoods. He also created a rotating council where representatives from each funded coalition share experiences, so best practices could spread organically. The Philanthropic Challenge thus transcended a one-time contest, evolving into a living, adaptive process. Media coverage gradually shifted in tone. Instead of fixating on short-term controversies, articles highlighted the personal stories behind each project. The single mother who found a stable job through the Microenterprise Initiative, the teen who discovered a passion for renewable tech while installing solar panels, the retired carpenter who mentored younger people in renovation projects. Skeptics pointed out that the city still faced numerous problems. Crime hadn't vanished, poverty lingered. But few could deny that a tangible momentum replaced the old malaise. The philanthropic structure, with its emphasis on collaboration, had catalyzed a transformation in how citizens viewed their power to effect change. As the first anniversary of the challenge approached, the city organized a celebration in a renovated park near downtown. The once barren park now boasted new lighting, greenery, and an arts pavilion designed by local students. Barron was invited to attend as an honored guest. He considered politely declining, preferring not to overshadow the event. But the committee insisted, reminding him that his initial impetus had inspired everything. So on a warm summer evening, he arrived at the park. Families milled around food stands, local musicians performed upbeat tunes, and the air crackled with a sense of hope. A modest stage stood at the center, from which different coalition leaders thanked everyone for their contributions. When Barron's name was finally called, the applause was louder than he expected. He walked onto the stage with a measured stride, scanning the crowd. The faces below included city officials, nonprofit volunteers, business owners, educators, and countless residents who had contributed in ways big and small. Many wore T-shirts bearing logos of their coalition projects. Children ran between the legs of adults, giggling. He thought back to the bleak images he'd first seen, those empty factories and exhausted neighborhoods. The difference in mood was palpable, not an overnight miracle, but a testament to how hearts could change when given a chance to speak, plan, and build collectively. He stood before the microphone, letting the applause die down naturally. I see so many of you wearing shirts that say "Together we build." And that's the perfect motto for what's happened here. A year ago, this city faced an uncertain future, weighed down by challenges that had festered for decades. We launched a philanthropic challenge not as a magic bullet, but as an invitation for every neighborhood, every organization, every dreamer to come forward with solutions grounded in your lived experiences. The real heroes of this story are you, the people who chose collaboration over division. No single grant, no single plan could have healed the city alone. It took all of you. He paused, exhaling into the evening air, scented with grilled food and fresh-cut grass. I didn't come here to hand out charity. I came to support the strengths you already possessed, to encourage you to link arms and share resources. Over the past year, we've seen alliances blossom where once there was rivalry. We've seen marginalized voices find platforms, children discover opportunities, local businesses gain new life. And while we still have obstacles to overcome, I have faith that your united spirit will keep guiding you forward. Warm cheers rose from the crowd. They weren't deafening roars that one might hear at a political rally, but a heartfelt ovation of gratitude and validation. Volunteers on stage wiped away tears. A local teacher shouted that her school's attendance rates had improved. Barron offered a small, humble smile. This is not an ending, he continued. It's a midpoint. The philanthropic challenge remains ongoing. New proposals can emerge. Existing projects can scale up. The funds will remain accessible to those who keep the flame of cooperation alive. And beyond money, you have each other, forging networks that can outlast any single source of funding. As he stepped away from the mic, the band resumed playing, and a gentle hum of celebration filled the park. Dozens of people approached Barron to shake his hand, share success stories, or merely say thanks. Some handed him printed photos of newly renovated community centers or children engaged in coding lessons. Others pressed personal notes into his hand, describing how a scholarship or training program had changed their trajectory. He listened to each with the same calm presence, ensuring they felt heard. In that swirl of gratitude and community spirit, the essence of the Philanthropic Challenge became tangible, a demonstration that quiet, methodical investment in local strengths could spark a renaissance. Eventually, as dusk deepened, the lights strung overhead turned the park into a glowing haven. Families began drifting home, children yawning and clutching small crafts they'd made at booths. Coalition members packed up promotional materials, promising to meet again soon. Barron took one last walk through the transformed space. Lyle, as always, stayed near, offering a respectful distance so folks could approach Barron freely. The transformation of this once-neglected park symbolized the deeper transformation of the city itself. They parted ways with the local committee, who promised him a seat at future planning sessions if he wished to remain involved. He replied that he'd always keep an ear open for updates, but that the real leadership had to come from within the city. He was, after all, just a catalyst who believed in them enough to set a challenge in motion. That catalytic role, in his mind, was far more sustainable than any top-down philanthropic approach that made communities dependent. By pushing them to build alliances and co-own the outcome, he ensured that the improvements wouldn't collapse if he ever withdrew. Driving away from the glowing park, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The Philanthropic Challenge had validated his belief that real solutions emerge when people get the chance to collaborate with genuine support and minimal interference. Yes, there had been friction, skepticism, and near failures, but the final tapestry was undeniably bright. Over the next months and years, the city's progress might serve as an inspiration to other struggling regions. Perhaps some cynics elsewhere would roll their eyes, insisting that every city is unique, that not all places can replicate the same approach. Yet, at least for these residents, the memory of how they overcame distrust, found synergy, and birthed new hope would linger. That memory alone could carry them through countless future challenges. As night fully enveloped the skyline, Barron gazed out the window of the moving car, letting his thoughts settle. The philanthropic model he championed wasn't about quick heroics or one-sided charity. It was a structured invitation for communities to harness their own latent power. It was conversation rather than directive, seed funding rather than bailout, empathy rather than condescension. And it had blossomed into a living example of how a calm approach, steeped in respect for local wisdom, could achieve what so many top-down philanthropic efforts never accomplished: genuine, collaborative transformation that left the community stronger than any single donation could. Yes, challenges lay ahead. The projects would face real-world hurdles, from shifting economic trends to potential local politics. But the bonds formed among people who once saw each other as rivals were the real scaffolding. If they maintained communication and transparency, they would weather storms that might sink more fragile coalitions. In his quiet way, Barron felt proud, not of himself, but of them. He had shown them a path. Yet they had done the walking, step by determined step, forging a city that had learned to dream and act in unison rather than splinter into factions. That was the Philanthropic Challenge. More than a contest, more than a handful of grants. It was a living, evolving testament to the power of trusting communities to know what they need, once given a framework and resources. And in that power, a new kind of future had taken root, one that might stand as a beacon for others who dared to believe that unity, not division, lights the way forward.